I'm guessing maybe you've checked your portfolio recently and thought, why isn't this growing like I expected?
Yeah.
Or maybe you're just getting started with investing and suddenly, bam, you're hearing about oil shocks, Fed rate battles, global tensions.
A lot to take in.
It really is. And if you're feeling the pressure of, rising prices, wages maybe feeling a bit flat, markets looking uncertain,
Yeah,
well, you are definitely not alone. It's a very common feeling right now.
absolutely.
So our mission today for this deep dive is really to unpack these significant forces brewing behind the scenes, the things that could genuinely impact your personal finances in the coming months.
Right.
This isn't just about the Wall Street headlines you skim over. It's about how this kind of global chaos could actually hit your wallet. We'll be distilling insights from our sources on the 2025 financial storm, how Middle East tensions and U.S. policy could shake your money.
Exactly. We're looking at, well, 5 key financial stories really shaping the U.S. markets right now. And we'll pay special attention to those escalating tensions between Iran and Israel and the really critical kind of multifaceted role the United States is playing.
Okay.
The goal is to cut through the noise, help you understand what it all means for your investments, sure, but also your job, your overall financial future.
Okay, let's get into it. Our sources really seem to highlight one immediate flashpoint, those rising tensions between Israel and Iran.
Yeah, that's front and center.
It seems like in just the past few weeks, military actions have really ramped up. We're talking airstrikes, drone attacks, even cyber warfare. It feels much more active now.
It absolutely is. It's moved beyond just rhetoric.
So what's the most concerning new element here? What makes these recent escalations really significant for markets?
Well, what's particularly striking, and our sources point this out, is the U.S. role. It's complex. Yeah. America finds itself being pulled deeper into the conflict, right? Yeah. But at the same time, it's continuing to send arms and resources to Israel. So you have this kind of double role.
I see. Stabilizer or something else.
Exactly. It creates a lot of uncertainty. Yeah. Is the U.S. actually stabilizing things, or could it be, maybe inadvertently, deepening the crisis?
Yeah.
And that ambiguity, that's a major source of market jitters right now.
Okay, so you've got these big geopolitical moves. How quickly do the sources say that stuff translates into like a direct financial hit for regular people?
Yeah.
How does a drone attack become, pain at the pump?
That's the crucial link. It really comes down to the oil price.
Right.
Every action, every sanction, every military move, every bullet fired. Frankly, it all has the potential to send oil prices shooting up.
And we're already seeing that.
We are. This isn't theoretical. Brent crude, that's the international benchmark, it's already up about 18% just since June 10th.
Wow.
And some analysts are warning it could hit $130 a barrel if this conflict really boils over.
$130. Okay, what does that mean day to day?
Well, think about it. Gas prices would soar. Transportation costs for literally everything you buy would go up. Your grocery bill, definitely higher. And, when inflation like that rises, what does this Federal Reserve do? They get hesitant about cutting interest rates. They might even have to hike them again, though that seems less likely right now.
So there's a direct chain reaction.
Exactly. The sources frame it clearly. Global conflict can equal an oil shock, which means higher inflation, which likely means no Fed rate cuts, and that ultimately increases the risk of a recession.
That is sobering. It really makes you pause and think, doesn't it? What will $100 of groceries look like this fall if fuel prices just explode? That's not abstract for most people.
Not at all.
And speaking of things going through the roof, that takes us straight to the Federal Reserve, right? And their ongoing fight against inflation. What's the latest from them? What's the signal?
Well, just last week, the Fed decided to hold interest rates steady again. They're keeping them in that 4.25% to 4.50% range.
No cuts yet.
No cuts yet. And only, very cautious hints that maybe some cuts could come later in the year. It sounds like they're in a tough spot.
Didn't the market expect cuts sooner?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Markets had originally priced in like 2 or maybe even 3 rate cuts for 2025, but now that number's shrinking fast.
Why the hesitation? What are they seeing?
Well, our sources are pretty clear on this. Inflation just isn't falling fast enough. It's proving sticky. And if oil prices surge again, like we just discussed because of the Middle East tensions, well, that could make the Fed even more reluctant to cut rates.
And that affects pretty much everyone.
Absolutely. Credit card APRs stay high. Auto loan interest remains elevated. It makes it harder for first-time home buyers.
Yeah, the housing market.
Exactly. And it squeezes small businesses trying to get funding to grow. That's why, one personal finance creator we looked at basically said, if you're holding your breath for cheaper mortgage rates, you might be waiting quite a bit longer than you think.
So the practical question for you listening is, if rates do stay high through 2025, how does that change your financial plan? What adjustments might you need to make to your budget or maybe your savings goals?
It requires some thought.
Definitely. But, even as the Fed as a whole makes these big decisions, there's also some disagreement within the Fed itself. Right?
That's another layer, yes.
Yeah.
There's internal division. Some Fed officials, according to our sources, think they should probably cut rates fairly soon to avoid tipping the economy into recession.
The doves.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
But then others, the hawks, want to hold off longer. They're worried inflation isn't really under control yet.
And that lack of unity, what does that do?
It creates market volatility, uncertainty. You see the stock market rally one day because maybe there's a hint of a cut coming.
Hope springs eternal.
Right. And then the next day, some official makes a more cautious, hawkish comment, and the market tanks.
Well.
Total whiplash. And for regular retail investors, that can be incredibly frustrating. It might cause some people to panic sell or maybe just stay out of the market altogether, which means potentially missing out on long-term gains.
Yeah.
It's a really tricky environment to navigate.
Okay, so we've got global conflict, sticky inflation, a divided Fed. Surely that's enough complexity.
You'd think, but wait, there's more.
Oh, good. What now?
Politics. We have political uncertainty thrown into the mix, too. Election season always adds its own special kind of unpredictability.
Right. And our sources mentioned something specific here, didn't they? About potential changes at the Fed itself.
They did. What's getting attention is that former President Trump has publicly stated he might replace Fed Chair Jerome Powell if he's reelected.
Okay, and why is that significant?
Because that decision could fundamentally change how the Fed operates, or at least how markets perceive its operations and independence. And the potential candidates being floated for that job, they vary wildly. You've got some seen as extremely dovish, meaning they'd likely push hard for lower rates, and others seen as quite hawkish, who'd favor keeping rates higher to fight inflation.
So, massive uncertainty about future policy direction.
Exactly. And this kind of uncertainty, especially around the Fed's leadership and its independence, could send ripples through the whole economy. It affects mortgage rates, your retirement portfolio's growth, bond yields, everything.
Because markets hate surprises.
Precisely. Investors really dislike surprises and uncertainty. So this kind of political question mark hanging over the Fed could definitely cause some sharp, sudden moves in both stocks and bonds as we get closer to November.
So, another big question for you listening. Is your portfolio ready for a potential political shakeup? And what does being ready even mean in that kind of scenario? Worth thinking about.
Definitely.
This combination of uncertainty, economic, geopolitical, political, official, it's leading some major voices to sound a pretty serious warning about the overall economy, isn't it?
That's right. JP Morgan, for instance, recently cut its GDP growth forecast for 2025. They lowered it from 2% down to just 1.3%.
That's a significant cut. Why?
They cited a few key things: the risk of rising tariffs, persistently high interest rates, and of course the global instability we've been talking about.
And they mentioned recession risk, too.
They did. They put the odds of a recession hitting in the second half of the year at around 40%. But maybe even more concerning, they talked about the nightmare scenario.
Which is?
A potential return to stagflation.
Ugh, stagflation. Remind us what that looks like.
It's that nasty combination. High inflation, so prices keep rising, but coupled with low economic growth and usually rising unemployment, all happening at the same time.
Not good.
Not good at all. And for, typical middle-class Americans, the impact is very direct. You need your pay raises. If you get them, likely don't keep up with the rising cost of living. Your savings get eroded by inflation. And job security can start to feel a bit shaky. It's less of a sharp shock and more of a slow, grinding pressure.
That sounds like a really tough environment. So another challenging question for you. Are you prepared for potentially a slow, grinding economy, one that kind of punishes both savers and spenders?
It requires a different mindset.
Okay, so we've painted a picture of some potential storms brewing. But our sources also try to map out what might actually happen next, right? They outline a few likely paths.
Yes, they do. Based on current trends, they suggest 3 main scenarios for the second half of 2025. Let's quickly run through them.
All right, scenario 1.
Scenario 1, conflict escalates. This is the pessimistic one. Oil potentially hits that $130 a barrel mark we talked about. Inflation spikes again. The Fed has to delay rate cuts even further, maybe even consider hikes. Stocks could drop maybe 10%, perhaps more. And the probability of a recession climbs significantly.
Okay, not ideal. What's scenario 2?
Scenario 2, Conflict stabilizes. This is the more optimistic take. Maybe tensions ease, oil settles back down below $100 a barrel, inflation continues its slow grind lower, the Fed feels comfortable enough to deliver maybe 1 or 2 rate cuts, consumer confidence perks up a bit, and maybe the S&P 500 manages a rally by the end of the year.
A sigh of relief, perhaps, and the third one?
Scenario 3, U.S. political shock. This one focuses on the election aftermath. A significant policy shift, maybe related to trade or Fed independence, under either a Trump or Biden administration could disrupt things. Markets become volatile as they digest the changes. In this scenario, you might see investors temporarily flee to perceived safety. Things like gold, bonds, maybe even certain types of real estate could outperform stocks for a period.
Okay, 3 very different possibilities there.
Very different outcomes, yes.
So the big takeaway seems clear then. Preparation isn't just like a good idea, it feels necessary.
Absolutely essential.
And our sources offer some concrete steps, right? 5 smart financial moves to consider making before fall 2025, kind of regardless of which scenario plays out.
Exactly. These are moves that make sense in most environments, but especially now. First, audit your spending. Seriously. Inflation might get worse before it gets better, so cutting out waste now is key. Look at subscriptions, unnecessary daily buys, find where the leaks are.
Trim the fat. Makes sense.
Number 2, lock in fixed rates on debt if you can. If you have variable rate debt, like some personal loans or maybe a home equity line of credit, see if you can refinance into a fixed rate. Securing your payments before rates potentially climb higher offers peace of mind.
Good point. Third,
Boost your emergency savings. Aim for at least 4 to 6 months worth of essential living expenses, minimum. This is your buffer against job loss, unexpected medical bills, whatever life throws at you in an uncertain economy.
crucial cushion. Fourth,
Invest in defensive sectors, but strategically. So yes, think healthcare, utilities, the classics. But our sources also highlighted looking at specific consumer staples companies, the ones that have shown they can raise prices even when costs go up, and people still buy their products. They often pay reliable dividends too. It's about proven resilience.
Okay, smart. And the last one, number 5.
And this one's important, especially when markets get choppy. Stay invested. Resist the urge to try and time the market, pulling money out when things look scary and jumping back in when they look good. It rarely works. Consistent long-term investing, even through the downturns, generally leads to better outcomes. It's about riding out the storm, not trying to dodge every single raindrop.
That's great, actionable advice. Look, when the headlines are screaming about war or recession or inflation, it is really easy to feel kind of powerless, overwhelmed.
It definitely is.
But here's the thing our sources emphasize. You are not powerless.
That's the key message. The strength of your financial life, really, it depends on the quiet, deliberate decisions you make right now. Decisions to stay focused on your plan, to keep learning about what's happening, and to proactively protect and, yes, grow your wealth, even when the world feels this uncertain.
Because storms will always come, won't they? That's a given. But the prepared, they don't just survive, they can actually thrive.
Well said.
Thank you for joining us.